You're watching Saturday Anime on the Sci-Fi Channel.
The main character, Meguru, basically he has had a raw deal for most of his life. His sister is dying without a heart operation that's insanely expensive. He thought he had found some salvation by trusting in this charity group or something. They acted nice, just like the fat guy did. But the second they got what they wanted or were put into an advantageous position, in this case having a lot of money, they turned tail and ran. Which really shows an aspect of human nature or an exploration of it. How in life, there are people you can trust, but there are also people you can't, and oftentimes life will put you in a situation where it feels like everything is working against you. And that's one thing that the story does explore a lot of with Meguru, because he goes through a lot of nonsense throughout it. He has to basically kill someone in order to save his sister. He questions his own morality, wondering whether or not killing people or even participating in this game where he maybe indirectly causes someone to die is worth it just to make himself happy, and whether or not he can even go on living after everything that he has suffered through in this contest. And even though the story shows that there are people who are cruel and revel in cruelty and that life can be harsh, bitter, and unpleasant, there are bright spots to it. It's through his love for his sister and later his love for Momoko, as well as holding on to the good things that exist in life and towards a good future that he could have, that he's able to push past all the negativity, all the darkness he's experiencing, which is extra impressive because near the end he's actually in the position where all of his senses are locked away, so he quite literally is trapped with his own negativity and dark thoughts, practically drowning in misery to where it looks like he's actually going to die. I think that ultimately boils down to it. Squid Game is more about desperation and surviving, whereas with Life is Money, it's more looking at the psychological aspect. Are you willing to bear the dark times that you'll experience through life because of the good moments you have, or will you sink into despair? That's kind of the difference between Nico and Meguru. Nico got just as bad a hand dealt in life, but he basically falls into nihilism and believes all life is suffering, and therefore why bother pretending or being morally righteous? Whereas Meguru, despite suffering similarly, he chooses to hold on to the things in life that matter to him because he feels like even if life gets dark, those sorts of things can keep him grounded and give him hope.
I will agree that Life is Money is definitely much more psychological. But what I think is interesting about Squid Game is that it addresses the psychological element by letting us know that this is voluntary. These characters in Squid Game are doing this by choice. They could have left, but they're doing it anyway, and it's showing us how desperate they are. Another problem I have with this story, it doesn't address how psychology could be a choice, or in other words, how you react to bullying is a choice. Every character in this story who, when they're bullied, they fall to pieces. It would be interesting if we had a character who we would see this character grow, who they would start to realize it doesn't matter what these characters think. I don't need their validation. And even with that other character who's the sadist, Romero, there's a sequence when he tries to kill Meguru, they all decide to shun him, and we're just going to shun him and pretend like he doesn't exist. That's a really interesting idea because his sadistic personality completely changes when he's not getting any validation. And I wish they would have explored that more about how people crave validation. Part of the key to winning the game in Life is Money is just not to need validation from anybody. That's why that psychiatrist dude is such a formidable adversary.
Technically, we do at least see one character who does grow. That's Momoko, who we learn at the beginning is a very shy, withdrawn kind of character, and we learn from her backstory that the reason she's participating is because her father racked up a massive amount of gambling debt, and when he killed himself, she was saddled with it. She comes across as the most emotionally vulnerable of the entire group. She's extremely easily frightened and very quick to cling to Meguru because he's one of the only decent people in the contest and he offers to help her. And we see as time passes, she slowly, despite suffering through much of the same psychological trauma that he does, she pushes past her fears and her anxiety to be a pillar of strength for Meguru to lean on when he is forced to deal with losing more and more of his senses. And eventually, she gains enough self-confidence and enough strength to where, despite Aoshi, the psychiatrist, basically ripping into her with every trick that he can, she just stands there stone-faced two-faced and takes it and basically makes it clear, almost tells him to his face that he is a pathetic, sad, lonely individual and that nothing he does can hurt her, and he might as well do the world a favor and just die right there, and he does. She ends up beating arguably the most dangerous guy, at least from a psychological standpoint, in the contest, despite her at the beginning of the story being the most likely to crack out of the starting gate.
I like Momoko too because she's also the source of a lot of fan service in the manga, which is always very cool. What I wish they did with Momoko is I wish they did what they did with Sangwoo in Squid Game. I think it would have been cool if Momoko and Meguru started off as friends and whatever, and then their friendship started to splinter and now they become adversarial with each other. And I think the ending of this manga would have been so much more interesting if it was Meguru versus Momoko versus the psychiatrist guy, because the psychiatrist guy is such an obvious villain that there is literally a scene in this manga where Meguru has a blindfold on and he's accusing the psychiatrist of killing somebody. The story is basically saying even a blind person knows this guy's evil.
Well, part of the problem with that is you have to also take the character's motivations or reasons for being there into account. Momoko's only reason for being there is because she was saddled with debt, but the amount of debt was only 9 million yen, meaning that she would have nothing to gain from turning against Meguru. Whereas the other guy, the show makes it very clear that in the end only one person can win Squid Game, since by the end there's only 3 people left alive and he kills the North Korea girl, so he's the only one left standing. For him, he has to go crazy because that's the only way to win, whereas in Life is Money, Meguru and Momoko can both win and they can both walk away with money because everybody who lives gets money.
I agree with you. If we were going to rewrite the story, watching two characters like in Squid Game who were friends become enemies is much more interesting than watching a guy who is good, who we know is good, and a guy who is bad, who we know is bad, just do good and bad things. You understand?
I think part of what helps is the way he goes about it. We've seen characters in anime who are good win by beating up their enemies. We've seen them by talking them down, like with Naruto and his talk no jutsu. We've seen them win through all kinds of other means, but in the case of Meguru, he doesn't win in the end. He doesn't defeat the psychiatrist. Rather, he has to defeat his own dark emotions, because he's essentially a prisoner of his own body since he can't feel, smell, touch, taste, or hear. He literally has to basically sit there with his own dark thoughts and ideas. He has no idea what's going on. He has no idea if Momoko is going to survive. He has no idea if his sister's going to survive. He has no idea if he's even still alive himself, because he literally can't feel anything. He has to essentially overcome that in order for him just to survive, which honestly I feel like after everything that he goes through and being able to overcome that kind of a hurdle, being able to psychologically outthink some other guy would be cake by comparison.
They don't even really spend a lot of time when he's paralyzed. It's like less than one chapter, and then Momoko comes and just like, okay, you're done. Let me tell you about the final battle that you did not witness. All that stuff that you described is great. I wish they would have spent more time developing that in the story. Even with Utsunomiya, what is interesting about her is she essentially becomes a living doll. Like, she carries around Chappie, which is her doll, and then she is paralyzed and then is puppeted by the killer like she's a doll. There's an interesting juxtaposition going there, but the story doesn't do anything with it. It's just there. And even like the other characters that you mentioned, the old dude and then that other guy, the big dude, the story just forgets about them. It's like, I guess they got their money and went off and did stuff. Who the hell knows? Even like the psychiatrist, that one guy raises the question where he's like, you're not really a psychiatrist. And then it's like, am I? And then it's like, I don't know. Are you? There's so many loose ends in this story that it doesn't tie up. And I would love if there were just another 10 chapters of it.
I feel kind of like this series could benefit from being made into an anime, because then they could basically do all the stuff that you talked about there, add a bit more depth to the characters, because the manga is so short that effectively gives them a ton of wiggle room to make it longer for, like, even if it was a 13 episode anime, though I think it would probably be better as like maybe 20 or 24, they could add a bunch of stuff to it. And I really feel like with the art and the themes and the characters, it would probably make for a pretty good anime adaptation, I think.
Life is Money has a happy ending, but I think it's much more nihilistic than Squid Game, because in Life is Money, Meguru hooks up with Momoko and he gets the operation for his sister and they live presumably happily ever after, but it never addresses really this idea of the evil the other characters committed, like the bullying and then the fat guy stealing everybody's food. It basically just says they were bad people who did bad things. But with Squid Game, we have that sequence where Gi-hun and the old dude, and spoilers for for anyone who hasn't seen Squid Game, but Squid Game has the same reveal as Saw, where the useless old guy was behind the whole fucking thing. But the old guy and Gi-hun have that moment where they have the bet with the homeless guy on the sidewalk. The old guy is telling him, do you have faith in humanity? Do you think somebody's gonna come? And eventually somebody does come and helps that dude. And then we see that Gi-hun does have faith in humanity because Squid Game is a story about desperation. And the story is essentially telling us the reason people are doing evil shit in Squid Game is because they are desperate and they have no choice. And so this old guy is basically putting all these people in these fucked up situations where they have no choice but to do fucked up things, and then uses that as a justification for people being fucked up, saying, see what they did? But it's like, no, motherfucker, you made them do that. But with Life is Money, we don't have any kind of justification for the evil the characters are committing. I mean, aside from, I guess, psychological traumas they had, especially like the psychiatrist or even the host, the Black Tapia guy, like why is he involved in all of this? Life is Money, I think, is kind of negative. And I wish it got into the idea more of your mind is your house and you could fortify your house against anything. The whole idea we're engaging in this psychological warfare, but the only warfare we're seeing is the offensive. We're not seeing the defensive. We're not seeing the person build the walls in their mind and say, I'm not going to be bothered by these things that you say. I don't care.
I think that ultimately comes down to like the time limit, which I feel like the fact that they all know there's a 10-day time period where they basically have to be stuck with these people and they can't get away, that part of exacerbates things, because in normal situations like this, like when someone is psychologically tormenting you, whether it's online or in person, if it's in person, most of the time you can just walk away and ignore them, or if it's online, you can block them or just stop visiting that particular website or something. But in this case, the characters are stuck in this place with each other, so they pretty much can't just walk away from them. And so in some cases, it's a little harder to think of ways to defend yourself in that kind of a situation, since you're not exactly given nearly as much breathing room. I think it is a very good manga that has some very interesting ideas and has some nice twists on the whole death game concept, and I definitely feel like it would benefit from an anime adaptation, and I really would like more people to at least read it so that maybe that would be a possibility, because I definitely feel like the whole psychological aspect and the fact that it's a game where the characters are put in a situation where they don't actually have to kill each other, but they choose to because it's easier and quicker, and the fact that they kill each other through psychological warfare rather than brute force violence is a nice change of pace, and I kind of wish more of these death games tried that.